Garbage collectors who were making their rounds early one morning found a home ablaze and immediately called in the fire brigade, who rushed to the scene. While extinguishing the fire, they observed movement in the upper bedroom window. Someone was trying to grab their attention and clearly needed help. Medical personnel were summoned to the location, and the individual, in a state of shock and unable to communicate, was rescued. Subsequently, the individual was transported to the hospital, where they later slipped into a coma. Meanwhile, bodies were recovered from the premises, and authorities determined that the victims had been murdered rather than perishing in the fire. This unsettling revelation prompted widespread speculation. Who could have perpetrated such a heinous crime against this innocent and beloved family? This is the shocking case of the Roman family. Jean-Claude Roman was born in Lons-le-Saunier, France on February 11, 1954, and raised in Clairvaux-les-Lacs in Jura. He attended Lons-le-Saunier's high school until he completed his baccalaureate. In 1971, he started classes at Lycée du Parc in Lyon, but left after one term. Later, he joined medical school. He would later marry a woman named Florence Crollet. Florence Crollet was born on March 6, 1956. She studied at the University of Lyon to become a doctor. It is there that she met Jean-Claude Roman. Jean-Claude, who was a distant cousin of the family, initially didn't catch Florence's interest. They also barely knew each other and didn't spend a lot of time together. However, over time, through their mutual friends and study sessions, they started spending more time together. Jean-Claude Roman was immediately smitten with Florence and made persistent efforts to win her over. She, on the other hand, saw him as an ordinary guy, not particularly attractive to her or well-spoken. Florence had envisioned marrying a typical doctor, intelligent, attractive, and charming. Following a failed second-year exam, she switched from medicine to pharmacy. Together with Roman and Luc l'Admiral, who passed their exams, they maintained a routine for the next decade, studying, taking exams, and supporting each other until graduation. In 1980, Florence and Jean-Claude Roman tied the knot, and 6 years later, they had their first child, Caroline. 2 years after Caroline's birth, their son Antoine arrived. Florence lived the life of a conventional wife and mother, working at local pharmacies to support her family, while her husband worked at the World Health Organization in Geneva, a short distance from their home in France. Florence was out and about in Ferney, France, a few days post-Christmas in 1992. Her children, Caroline and Antoine, were at school, while Jean-Claude was at work in Geneva. It was a typical day, reminiscing about their recent Christmas festivities. While out, she bumped into the school president, who had something on his mind since before the holidays. Politely exchanging holiday greetings, they chatted about their Christmas experiences. The conversation gradually shifted to an intriguing incident involving Florence's husband. The president mentioned the headmaster's demotion due to an affair with a teacher, prompting a school board meeting. Florence remembered the incident, but was uncertain where the president was leading with the conversation. He mentioned his intention to discuss the matter with Jean-Claude, as he also served on the school board. The president's secretary attempted to find Jean-Claude's contact information in the World Health Organization directory, given his employment there, but strangely, his name was not listed. Florence found this amusing as she laughed it off, but at the same time, she was intrigued. She assured the president that there must be a valid explanation for the absence of his name and number, promising to address it with her husband upon his return from work. After exchanging farewells, they never spoke again. Jean-Claude Roman kept his work life quite private, sharing minimal details with both family and friends. Florence held the belief that her husband engaged in significant research and commanded respect in the medical field. He maintained a clear boundary between his professional and personal life, to the extent that Florence never had access to his office phone number, as Roman had insisted on wanting to remain undisturbed during work hours. If Florence ever required urgent communication with him, she had to page him, and he would promptly return her call at his earliest convenience. Friends often inquired about Jean-Claude's role at the WHO in conversations with Florence. They would ask, "What exactly does Jean-Claude do at the WHO?" Florence would attempt to deflect the question with a chuckle, confessing that she too was uncertain. Occasionally, she would playfully speculate that one day she might discover her husband was a secret spy. It was during the Christmas season of 1992 that Florence learned of an annual Christmas tree event organized by the WHO. This gathering allowed staff members to bring their families to the office to decorate a large Christmas tree together. Surprisingly, her husband had never mentioned this event to her. Florence felt unsettled by the situation. From the school president's revelation about her husband's absence in the WHO directory to the discovery of the unmentioned family event at his workplace after over a decade of service, these incidents likely lingered in Florence's thoughts. The extent to which these revelations troubled Florence internally remains uncertain, as it is unclear whether she confronted her husband about them. As recounted by Florence's brother, who joined the family for the holiday season, a profound sadness seemed to shadow Florence during those days. The conversations that transpired within the household during this period are left to speculation. The days rolled by, ushering in the new year of 1993. A couple of days into the year, Florence and Jean-Claude Roman found themselves shopping together. Insisting that Roman purchase a new suit, Florence eventually persuaded him. Later that same day, after parting ways with his wife, Roman made a visit to a pharmacy, placing an order set to be ready by January 9th. On the evening of January 5th, Roman made withdrawals from 2 different ATMs, totaling 2,000 francs. He generously gave 500 francs to a homeless individual he encountered before proceeding to a gun store. Exiting the store, he carried tear gas canisters, cartridges, a silencer for a .22 caliber rifle, and a stun wand. Returning home, the night passed uneventfully, and time passes until a frantic call to the fire brigade was placed on January 11th at 4 a.m., reporting a fire engulfing the house. Garbage collectors on their early morning rounds discovered the blazing house and promptly alerted the fire brigade, who rushed to the location. While extinguishing the fire, the responders noticed movement in the upstairs bedroom window, indicating someone was inside, seeking help. Medical personnel were summoned, and the person who was Jean-Claude Roman was rescued from the residence. Upon extraction, he appeared in a state of shock, unresponsive as paramedics attended to him. Subsequently, Jean-Claude was transported to the hospital, where he eventually lapsed into a coma. Within a short span, the fire was extinguished, enabling the first responders to enter the premises. Their family friend Dr. Luc Ladmiral was summoned to the scene, witnessing with dread as stretchers carried out the charred remains of Antoine, Caroline, and Florence. Whenever a household fire results in fatalities, the police launch an inquiry to uncover the circumstances surrounding the incident. This process aims to offer closure to the bereaved families and eliminate the possibility of any criminal activity. Therefore, following the tragic fire at the Roman residence, law enforcement authorities initiated an investigation, given the magnitude of the loss of an entire family of a prominent doctor. During the examination of Florence's remains, the medical team made a disconcerting observation: evidence of blunt force trauma to the back of her skull. This revelation sparked suspicion and intrigue, particularly after determining that Florence's demise resulted from blunt force trauma rather than the fire itself. During the examination of the children, another distressing revelation emerged. Contrary to initial assumptions, both Caroline and Antoine did not perish in the fire. Instead, they met their demise from gunshot wounds hours prior to the inferno. This stark reality indicated that the events unfolded before the household was consumed by flames. Subsequently, law enforcement commenced an inquiry into the suspicious deaths of Florence and her children. However, with Jean-Claude Roman incapacitated in a coma, rendering him unable to provide any information, investigators faced the daunting task of pursuing alternative leads. Transforming the Roman residence into a crime scene, authorities reached out to relatives, acquaintances, and neighbors in a bid to unravel the mysteries surrounding the family. Luc Ladmiral, the doctor who witnessed the victims being removed from the scene, was contacted as part of the investigation. Uncertain about the unfolding events, he struggled to comprehend the situation. When questioned by investigators about potential enemies of the family, Luc couldn't identify any. Nevertheless, he was summoned for an interview. Several days later, Luc found himself facing police officers who probed into the family's relationships and recent events that could have triggered the fire. Despite thorough questioning, the consensus remained unchanged. The family enjoyed a positive reputation, and no significant incidents preceded the tragedy. Subsequently, the focus shifted to Jean-Claude Roman, revealing a shocking revelation. Roman had never been employed by the World Health Organization, nor had he delivered any lectures at the University of Dijon. In fact, he was not a qualified doctor at all, let alone being employed. Initially skeptical, Luc's disbelief grew as he recollected their shared academic journey, which slowly led him to a startling realization. He recounted to the authorities an incident from their second year when he had noticed Jean-Claude Romain's absence during an exam. This departure from Romain's usual behavior had raised concerns for Luc. Upon visiting Romain at his residence, he observed his friend's ailing condition, who had clammy skin, pale complexion, and dark circles under his eyes. Jean-Claude Romain disclosed that he was battling lymphoma, a form of cancer, albeit manageable, exacerbated by exam-related stress. At Romain's request, Luc pledged to keep this information confidential, especially from Florence. Investigators determined that Luc didn't have any additional pertinent details. Consequently, they awaited the forensic laboratory's findings on the charred residence, hoping to glean further insights for their inquiry. Investigators noted peculiarities within the residence. They discovered that all doors had been locked internally, indicating that no unauthorized individuals had entered the premises. Initially, an accidental fire was the primary hypothesis until the condition of the bodies was revealed. Subsequent findings hinted at a more sinister turn of events, prompting the urgent need to interview Jean-Claude. During Jean-Claude Romain's coma-induced weeks, law enforcement zeroed in on him as their prime suspect, initiating a thorough investigation. Although Romain lacked a medical degree, his extended tenure at the university raised suspicions. Upon contacting the educational institution, it was confirmed that Romain had pursued studies for 12 years. While he successfully completed his first-year exams, he failed to pass those in the second year. Exploiting the absence of enrollment restrictions, Romain continuously re-enrolled in the second year throughout his academic tenure. All those years of academic dedication, attending lectures and studying medical books, yet Jean-Claude's failure to pass the second-year examination seemed perplexing. The possibility of oversleeping and missing the exam session lingered as a plausible explanation. A chance for redemption had presented itself with the opportunity to retake the exam months later, but he never showed up. As investigators delved into the deaths of Florence and the children, they were confronted with another grim discovery. Jean-Claude's uncle, seeking to relay the tragic news to his parents, arrived at their residence only to encounter an eerie silence. Upon entering, he discovered the lifeless bodies of his mother and father, both victims of gunshot wounds. A ballistic examination confirmed that Jean-Claude's parents had been fatally shot with the same firearm used on Antoine and Caroline. Furthermore, the close proximity of their estimated time of death indicated a deliberate connection. The unfolding events only grew more mysterious. Following the public disclosure of the tragedies, the police received an anonymous call from a woman unwilling to disclose her identity or any personal information, expressing reluctance to involve herself in the investigation. However, she did possess crucial information to share, revealing that she had engaged in a romantic relationship with Jean-Claude Romain after meeting him in Paris, and she too had been told that he was a researcher at the World Health Organization. Romain had misled her into believing he was a specialist with influential connections attributed to his purported role. The woman had been led to believe that Jean-Claude Romain was actively involved in and financing significant research projects. Moreover, he portrayed the banks in Geneva as highly advantageous. Leveraging his supposed position, Romain enticed her with the opportunity to invest funds in a Swiss bank offering an impressive 18% interest rate return. Through persuasive tactics, Romain managed to persuade his lover to make a financial investment. Initially hesitant, they reached an agreement wherein the woman would provide him with 90,000 francs for investment, with the expectation of receiving returns after 3 months. As the deadline approached in early January, she reminded Jean-Claude Romain of their arrangement, emphasizing her need for the funds to sustain herself and her family. Following negotiations, they arranged to meet for a dinner gathering, with Romain extending an invitation to dine with a prominent political figure, sparking the woman's interest and eagerness to reclaim her investment. On the agreed day, Romain picks her up in Paris to embark on their anticipated journey. As night descended, Jean-Claude Romain and the woman found themselves still on the road, clearly lost. Suddenly, Romain pulled over and launched a surprise attack on the woman inside the car. He employed tear gas, a stun wand, and a cable in an attempt to incapacitate her. However, she fiercely fought for her life and managed to escape from the vehicle. Romain pursued her, but inexplicably halted when she pleaded for mercy. It seemed that he realized his plan had failed, and he begged for forgiveness. The excuse he provided to the woman was now familiar to the investigators. He claimed that his lymphoma was flaring up, causing him to behave erratically and unlike his usual self. In a state of survival mode, the woman agreed to remain silent about the incident in exchange for Jean-Claude safely returning her home. Investigators began to develop a grim perception of Jean-Claude Roman. He was a pathological liar, a manipulator, and a scam artist. But the question that lingered in detectives' minds now was he also a murderer? Upon awakening from his coma, Jean-Claude Roman was promptly approached by investigators eager to engage in conversation. With suspicions lingering, they sought a confession from him. However, Roman chose to remain silent. He sat in his hospital bed, gazing into the distance with a vacant expression, refraining from speaking. As inquiries swirled about the events of January 9th, the origins of the fire, the shooting of Antoine and Caroline, the severe injuries sustained by his wife, the discovery of his deceased parents, Jean-Claude faced a barrage of interrogative probes during multiple sessions. Despite the relentless questioning, he divulged nothing. It wasn't until the investigators told him that they knew the truth, that he was not a doctor and was unemployed, that a shift occurred. The tipping point that prompted him to finally break his silence remains unknown, but eventually he began to speak. On the night of January 9th, Jean-Claude and Florence were spending a typical evening at home. After putting the children to bed, they retired to their own bedroom. According to Jean-Claude Roman, his memories of that night abruptly ceased until the chilling recollection of discovering his wife sprawled on their bed, surrounded by a pool of blood, with a bloodied rolling pin in his hand. Uncertain of what transpired, whether an argument had ensued or not, Jean-Claude Roman proceeded to sleep beside his wife and awoke the following morning to prepare breakfast for the children. Caroline and Antoine gathered on the couch to watch a cartoon selected by their father. He served them each a bowl of cereal before joining them to watch television. When the children inquired about their mother's absence, he informed them that she was unwell and needed extra rest. During that morning, Jean-Claude observed that Caroline felt warm, prompting concerns about her health. To prevent any potential illness from spreading, he instructed Caroline to go upstairs to her bedroom. Somehow, Caroline ended up lying face down on the bed with a pillow over her head. Romand couldn't provide a clear explanation to investigators regarding this sequence of events, but speculated that it may have evolved from a game he played with his daughter. Subsequently, he retrieved his .22 caliber rifle, fitted with a silencer, and fatally shot his 7-year-old daughter in the back of her head. In a similar manner, Antoine met his tragic demise. His memories then became hazy. Subsequent evidence presented during the trial indicated that he left the house, purchased newspapers, and appeared to engage in routine activities, portraying a normal demeanor to any casual observer. Upon returning home, he watched television. Although Jean-Claude refuted these details during the trial, one fact remained certain. He received a phone call from his parents, inviting him for lunch before noon on that fateful day. And he accepted the invitation. Departing from his eerily quiet residence, he drove to his parents' home and joined them for lunch. He then summoned his father upstairs under the guise of inspecting a purportedly malfunctioning boiler pipe. Despite his elderly father's physical limitations, he made an effort to examine the pipe at Jean-Claude's request, only to be callously shot in the back by his own son. Descending to where his mother was, he did not concoct any games or stories this time. His mother became the sole victim whom he shot while facing her. The motive behind this act remains a mystery. Before departing, he also shot the family's dog. When questioned about this during the trial, it was the only instance where he exhibited a semblance of remorse. Overcome with emotion, he broke down in sobs and tears, revealing that the dog had been cherished by his children, evoking memories of Caroline. It was at this moment that Jean-Claude Roman resolved to return home and take his own life. However, his plan did not unfold as intended. Recall the earlier mention of his mistress providing him with 90,000 francs for an alleged investment scheme? This was how Jean-Claude Roman sustained himself. He regaled numerous individuals, including his relatives and Florence's family, with tales of extravagant returns on investments, and due to their familiarity with Roman, they placed their full trust in him and they let him cook. Consequently, he amassed substantial sums of money from these trusting individuals over time. He would channel these funds into accounts under his own name in Geneva, thereby avoiding scrutiny from tax authorities, among others. Moreover, he meticulously managed the family's financial affairs, ensuring that Florence remained unaware of his deceitful activities. Of course, and eventually, the inevitable time to serve what he was cooking had arrived. As expected, the people began demanding the return of their money, along with the promised profits. Regrettably, this was an obligation he could never fulfill. Every single franc he acquired was swiftly spent on his immediate needs, leaving him with virtually nothing saved, despite amassing over 2 million francs across the years. The inevitable moment arrived when he would have to reveal the truth to Florence and all those who had entrusted him with their money. He found himself unable to sustain his web of lies any longer. The mounting pressure left him feeling trapped with no apparent escape. Like many other family annihilators, he convinced himself that by ending their lives, he would actually be sparing his family from the repercussions of his actions. Subsequently, he planned to take his own life, thus avoiding the harsh reality he faced. He believed he would be able to keep lying forever and had never anticipated being discovered or facing the need to confess. He would always just plan to fabricate another falsehood to sustain the charade throughout his life. On June 23, 1996, the trial commenced. He remained mostly silent, seated behind glass with a police officer on each side. He avoided making eye contact and kept his head down. By July 2nd, a verdict had been reached. Jean-Claude Roman was convicted of the murders of his wife, his children, and his parents. He received a life sentence without the possibility of parole for 22 years. In 2019, he petitioned for release from prison to reside in a convent. During his incarceration, he had reportedly become a devout Christian. He had accepted his mistakes and would spend the rest of his life repenting as a form of punishment. The judge granted his plea, citing his good conduct as a contributing factor. It is sad and unfortunate what all the victims endured at the hands of this liar, manipulator, and monstrous individual. As we reflect on this horrific tale, our hearts and minds are with the individuals whose lives were abruptly ended and the grieving families and friends they left behind. In the heart of Columbia, South Carolina, amidst the energy of a bustling college town, the life of a young student named Samantha Lee Josephson took a dark and tragic turn. Her story is one that gripped a nation and shed light on the potential dangers that lurk in the most routine aspects of our lives. Samantha, a vivacious and ambitious young woman, was a beacon of light on the University of South Carolina campus. Little did anyone suspect that a routine night out would lead to a series of events that would shatter the lives of those who knew her. Samantha Lee Josephson was born to her parents Seymour and Marcy Josephson in Princeton, New Jersey, and grew up in Robbinsville, New Jersey as a child. She attended the University of South Carolina, where she majored in political science. Samantha, who was a senior in college at the time of her demise, planned on graduating in 2019 and attending Drexel University School of Law, where she wanted to study to become a lawyer specializing in international law. Samantha earned a full scholarship to Drexel University, as well as a partial scholarship to Rutgers, and aspired to practice international law. Samantha was a member of the Alpha Gamma Delta sorority, studied abroad in Barcelona, and visited Madrid and Paris during her time in South Carolina. Samantha was amazingly beautiful and had a wonderful smile. Samantha had a boyfriend named Greg, and the couple was very close to each other. They kept in touch with each other every day, constantly texting and calling each other whenever it was possible. They had plans to start a future together. Even when Samantha was going to be attending law school, Greg was going to move in with her and support her. Everything seemed going well till Friday, March 29, 2019, when she never returned to her apartment, and things took a turn for the worse for Samantha. On the evening of March 28, 2019, Samantha planned to go out with her roommate and some friends in Columbia, South Carolina. Her boyfriend Greg was supposed to join them also, but he was back in his hometown at the time. Still, he told her to go out and have fun without him. Samantha was feeling gloomy after hearing of a family member's ailment. What she just needed was to distract herself a bit, and going out with some friends was the perfect opportunity to raise her spirits. The group met up and went to a few different bars before finally settling at a bar known as the Bird Dog Bar, which was located in an area known as 5 Points, a hotspot for students to hang out at bars. Even though Samantha was having a fun time out with her friends, she continuously texted her boyfriend Greg, beseeching him to make a 2-hour drive to visit her in Columbia because she needed emotional support. The couple had already made plans to see each other the following weekend, so her boyfriend never changed his mind and decided to stay where he was at, but still, he kept in constant communication with her. At around 2 a.m., Samantha decided to head back to her apartment by herself, and she called an Uber, a popular rideshare service, using an app on her phone. As that was a common practice among her and her peers on that occasion, fate would deliver her into the hands of a murderer. While Samantha was waiting for the Uber, she had one last chat on the phone with Greg at around 2:04 a.m. Samantha told him she was headed home and took an Uber on the way. That was the routine Samantha had done many times before, using an Uber to get to and from the bars because it was way too far for a walk. A few minutes after placing the request with an Uber, a car pulled up to the curb where Samantha and a group of other weary bar customers were waiting for lifts. Security cameras captured her approaching the car, only to realize that the driver was there for someone else. After doing an about-face, she is seen retreating to her spot on the sidewalk. Samantha was wearing an orange shirt and black pants. After some time, a black Chevrolet Impala driven by a man who was later identified as Nathaniel David Rowland pulled up into the space in front of her. Samantha said goodbye to Greg, and assuming that was her lift, she opened the door and exchanged a quick word with the person behind the wheel before climbing into the back seat. Once she was inside, the car sped off away. Within a matter of moments, the Uber that Samantha ordered arrived at the designated pickup location. After searching in vain for their customer, the driver canceled the request and left. From that point in time, nobody other than the 21-year-old political science major student and the man driving the Impala knew that she had gotten into the wrong car. The CCTV footage would later show that the black Chevrolet Impala circled the area numerous times before targeting Samantha. Anybody who has ever spent time in Five Points was aware that college kids gathered in the streets after the bars closed to wait for their rides, and watching him drive around the area gave rise to the conclusion that he knew exactly what he was doing that night. Amazing boyfriend Greg he tracked Samantha via the Find My Friends app on her phone to make sure that she got home safe that night. While he watched Samantha's movement on the map via the app, he realized that she was traveling in the opposite direction of where her apartment was located, although at first didn't think much of it, as it could be she was going to a friend's house. Greg later texted her to check to see if she was okay. Unfortunately, he never got any feedback. He then tried calling her, but she never answered her phone. Greg never gave up and tried texting her several more times until he noticed that messages he sent her showed up as delivered but not read, meaning Samantha never read any of Greg's text messages. Her phone location later on stopped sharing, which made Greg shocked, as it had never happened before. Greg later thought that Samantha misplaced her phone in the Uber, but still, he decided to call her friends and her roommate to find out if they heard from her or if she had made it to her home. Unfortunately, nobody heard from her or saw her. Greg hoped she would turn up in the morning and so tried to get some sleep. The following day in the morning, Samantha was nowhere to be found. Her roommates were concerned about her whereabouts and reported her missing. Her boyfriend, Greg, also made a 2-hour drive down to Columbia to assist in searching for her. A little over 3 to 4 hours after the missing person report was filed, the dead body of a young woman who was later confirmed to be Samantha Josephson was found by a group of turkey hunters in a woodland area in New Zion, about 65 miles away from Five Points, in less than 24 hours after she was last seen on the surveillance video, getting in a black car. Dumbfounded by the gruesome discovery, the hunters straight away called 911, and representatives from the local sheriff's office were quickly dispatched to the scene. After an autopsy was performed, it was very clear that whatever happened to Samantha was a completely violent attack. Her body had more than 120 separate stab wounds, with injuries to her face, head, neck, hands, upper body, legs, and feet. It was also determined that her fingernails were hacked to pieces as she tried to shield a razor-sharp-like tool from making contact with her flesh. It seemed that she was stabbed with a double-bladed knife and then dragged to the woods. The autopsy also revealed the extent of Samantha's blood loss compared to the human body, which normally has at least 4 liters of blood to her body, which only contained 20 milliliters of blood. Investigators were able to quickly pull that surveillance video footage from the bar that night before, which revealed that Samantha got into the black Chevrolet Impala car. Investigators noticed that the car was circling the block several times, which seemed that whoever was in it was watching and waiting for a potential victim. The investigators found out that Samantha accidentally got into her killer's car, thinking it was her Uber. The Uber that Samantha called was seen arriving a short time later. However, when the driver found she was not there, he canceled the trip and left. It was likely that the car she was in was not the Uber because she was murdered only a short time later, so investigators believed that the driver probably used child-proof locks to trap her inside, because when the child-proof lock is on, the doors can only be opened from the outside of a vehicle. So at that point, Samantha would not have been able to get out. The descriptions of the car were quickly revealed to the public in the hopes of finding the perpetrator before he struck again, and fortunately, it didn't take long. After the day when Samantha's body was discovered, the black Chevrolet Impala was spotted by officers on routine patrol at 3 a.m. on March 30th, cruising the very same area Samantha was kidnapped in. When the officers pulled the car over, the driver jumped out of the car and took off running. After a short chase, he was caught a few streets over and arrested. When the police checked his identification, they discovered that the man they had in custody was a 24-year-old resident of New Zion named Nathaniel Rowland. When the patrol officers took a look inside the car, they found a child's car seat in the back, surrounded by what seemed to be bloodstains, which promptly made them call for backup after perceiving that they were looking at a presumed crime scene. When homicide detectives took over, they combed the car from top to bottom and found profuse amounts of blood on the passenger seat and in the trunk, as well as a bloody footprint on one of the back rear windows. Samantha's cell phone was also found still lying on the floorboards, which the detectives would later learn that he had attempted to sell to a pawn shop earlier that day, but he didn't like $125 for the phone offer they gave him, therefore leading him to leave it in the car. The detectives also found the child locks activated, confirming the suspicion that that was exactly how Rowland trapped Samantha in his car. Detectives also found a variety of cleaning products in the car, including bleach, window cleaner, and antibacterial wipes. But luckily he didn't do that great of a cleaning job, because there was still a lot of blood in his car. During his interrogation, Rowland continuously denied having any knowledge of the kidnapping and murder of Samantha Josephson. Even with piling evidence to the contrary, he maintained that he was innocent of the crimes of which he was being accused. When a physical examination was performed on Rowland following his arrest, it unveiled traces of Samantha's DNA under his fingernails. In a bewildering turn of events, despite that her genetic markers were present in him, none of his DNA was found on her. While that was certainly unusual, when detectives pieced together the terrifying details of her final minutes on Earth, these findings made perfect sense. From what they could collect, detectives speculated that Samantha was a victim of a blitz attack. The fact that the child-proof locks in the car were still engaged at the time of Rowland's arrest led them to conclude that he activated that feature as soon as his victim got in the car, making it impossible for her to open the doors. Without any means of defending herself, Samantha was left helpless as the man she thought was her Uber driver stabbed her repeatedly with a double-bladed knife. Caught unawares by the ferocious attack, she had to put a lot of effort into trying to keep off the blows, which would account for the multiple stab wounds found on her hands, as well as the condition of her mangled fingernails. Considering the amount of excessive force that was imposed on her, it's understandable that Samantha was not able to scratch her attacker, which would have left his skin cells under her nails. After the dreadful act was done, Rowland drove to a farmer's access road in New Zion, where only a local would have known it existed, and dumped Samantha's body in the nearby woods. After arriving back home, Rowland spent much of the day posting on social media as if nothing had happened. Since he lived there nearly all of his life, and his residence was only minutes away from where the remains were found, that was two more strong pieces of evidence that pointed fingers to him as the killer. A peek into his background disclosed that Rowland was a devout churchgoer who had attended South Carolina State University in 2017, although there are no records of his having graduated, and it's not clear what he was doing for employment at the time. Rowland had one past felony arrest from October 2018 for obtaining a signature or property under pretenses. There was also a woman who was carjacked by two men, one of them being Roland, who assaulted her and forced her to drive to an ATM where they took her money. Then they forced her to drive home, where they robbed her of even more of her belongings, including a PlayStation 4. Roland was never convicted of robbing the woman. However, he did sell some of the woman's stolen belongings, including the PlayStation 4. When detectives obtained a search warrant for his girlfriend's apartment named Maria Howard in New Zion where he lived, they combed the trash bins behind the apartment, and they found a sock and bandana allegedly belonging to Roland that were heavily stained with Samantha's blood. The detectives also found a white sheet with blood on it, a roll of duct tape, bleach wipes with blood on them, and a two-bladed knife that seemed to have blood on it. Tests would later confirm that the blood found on the two-bladed knife, as well as blood found on the sheets, blood found in the car, and blood found on bleach wipes, was a match for Samantha Josephson. With the evidence against him mounting swiftly, Roland was initially charged with possessing a weapon during a violent crime, the kidnapping and murder of Samantha Josephson. The trial would be grueling for the family, with Nathaniel Roland pleading not guilty, claiming he was innocent even with the mountain of evidence against him. When the trial began in the summer of 2021, Roland's defense team argued that their client was an innocent man, based largely on the fact that his DNA had not been found on his alleged victim. On the other hand, prosecutors countered the defendant's claims of innocence with the undeniable amount of evidence that was collected in the case. Amid the proof they put forward was the CCTV footage showing his car picking Samantha up in 5 points and driving away, the quarts of her blood that were found in his car, her bloody footprint on the vehicle's back window, allegations that he tried to use her bank card at an ATM after disposing of her body, cell phone trackers that placed their devices in the same place at the time of the murder, and the fact that he lived near where her remains were discovered. A handwriting expert was also brought in to compare Roland's handwriting to a list that was written on a piece of paper found in his home. On that list it was written, "Duct tape, tape her whole body, gloves, all black, flip phone, gasoline, matches." The expert testified it was most likely that Roland wrote the list, which sounded as if it was all planned. The prosecutors called 31 witnesses to testify, including someone who saw Roland cleaning that weapon, the pawn shop owner to whom he tried to sell her Samantha's cell phone, and his ex-girlfriend who claimed her daughter had blood on her shoe after being in Roland's car after the murder. Roland called no witnesses, and none of his family testified for him. Still, he maintained his innocence and pleaded with the judge. It took the jury only an hour to deliver a guilty verdict, and Nathaniel Roland was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. In the wake of Samantha's murder, her parents Seymour and Marcy Josephson took it upon themselves to see to it that no one else suffered the same fate as their beloved daughter. As a means of achieving this goal, they started the What's My Name Foundation, which encourages people of all ages who contact rideshare agencies to ask the driver to identify them by name before setting foot inside a stranger's vehicle. The Josephsons also encouraged rideshare users to be mindful of a safety protocol they call SAMI, which stands for Stop, Ask, Match, and Inform. In the aftermath of Samantha's murder, the rideshare industry also took steps to protect drivers and passengers alike. One of the safeguards put in place was the issuance of a personalized 4-digit code that riders could use to confirm through the app that they were getting into the right car. Samantha's untimely death sent shockwaves through the hearts of her family and friends. The pain they bear is immeasurable, a testament to the bright light that Samantha was in their lives. Samantha Lee Josephson's story is a stark reminder that tragedy can strike unexpectedly. May her memory inspire us to be vigilant, look out for one another, and work collectively toward creating a world where safety and compassion prevail. Amidst the tranquil beauty of Shropshire, England, unfolded a narrative of sorrow and despair that left a lasting impact on an entire community. At the center of this narrative was Georgia Williams, a bright young soul whose aspirations were tragically extinguished by an incomprehensible act of cruelty. Georgia, with her boundless energy and dreams, embodied the essence of youth's vitality and optimism. Yet, beneath her cheerful demeanor lay shadows of turmoil that would eventually eclipse her promising future. Georgia Williams entered the world on September 17, 1995, in Telford, Shropshire, England. Growing up in a tight-knit family with her parents Lynette and Steve Williams, alongside her older sister Scarlett, Georgia's upbringing was filled with love and support. From a young age, Georgia exhibited a compassionate nature, always eager to lend a helping hand and ensure the happiness of those around her. However, this admirable quality would eventually become a vulnerability. Despite facing bullying during her middle school years, Georgia's transition to high school marked a significant turning point. She found herself embraced by a circle of friends, becoming a popular and beloved figure within the school community. Her compassionate nature and leadership skills were evident as she ascended to the role of head girl. Alongside her academic pursuits, Georgia pursued her passion for service by training as an air cadet, nurturing dreams of serving as an RAF paramedic in the future. Upon reaching 17 years old, Georgia secured a position at a local petrol station, where she quickly established rapport with her colleagues. Among them was Jamie Reynolds, a 22-year-old man who appeared withdrawn and marginalized within the group. Moved by her compassionate disposition, Georgia extended a hand of friendship towards him, determined to alleviate his sense of isolation. Through her efforts, Jamie gradually integrated into the social fabric of their workplace, joining in group activities and forging connections with his peers. As time passed, Jamie found himself developing affection for Georgia, recognizing her as the sole individual who had shown him kindness and believed in his potential. Fueled by hope, he began to entertain the possibility that Georgia might reciprocate his feelings. Encouraged by this belief, Jamie summoned the courage to express his sentiments to Georgia, expressing his desire to pursue a romantic relationship with her, even envisioning the prospect of becoming her boyfriend. However, Georgia, mindful of Jamie's emotions, gently declined his advances, conveying her reluctance to embark on a romantic entanglement and emphasizing her commitment to preserving their friendship. Despite his disappointment over Georgia's lack of romantic interest, Jamie appeared to accept her decision and endeavored to maintain their friendship. However, beneath the surface, a disturbing obsession and sinister fantasy began to take root within him. During a shift together at the petrol station, Jamie confided in Georgia about his dissatisfaction with his current circumstances. Expressing a desire to abandon his job at the petrol station and pursue his passion, Jamie hinted at aspirations of forging a career aligned with his interests. Eager to offer her support to Jamie, Georgia engaged him in a conversation to explore his hobbies and passions. Learning of Jamie's interest in photography, Georgia seized the opportunity to encourage him to pursue it as a potential career path. Enthusiastic about the idea, Jamie requested Georgia's assistance in crafting a professional portfolio and proposed her as his inaugural model. Honoring her commitment to their friendship, Georgia agreed to assist, and together they scheduled a photo shoot for Sunday, May 26, 2013. The arrangement entailed Georgia and a few mutual friends convening at Jamie's parental residence for the photo shoot. As Sunday approached, Georgia found herself torn between conflicting obligations. With her family hosting a barbecue and her long-unseen grandparents in attendance, Georgia contemplated cancelling the photo shoot at the last minute. However, mindful of Jamie's reliance on her and unwilling to disappoint him, Georgia ultimately resolved to honor her commitment. Assuring her family that she would only be a brief 5-minute drive away from Jamie's residence, Georgia planned to swiftly capture a few photographs before rejoining her family. In doing so, she aimed to fulfill her obligations to both her friend and her family, ensuring that neither party would be let down. On that particular day, Georgia swiftly prepared herself, styling her hair and applying makeup before donning jeans and a leather jacket. As she left home at 7:30 p.m., her father complimented her, remarking on her beauty and likening her appearance to Sandy from the movie Grease. With her family anticipating her prompt return, Georgia embarked on her journey. However, as the hours passed without her arrival, concern began to grow among her loved ones. Initially, her mother dismissed the delay, assuming Georgia had become engrossed in the photo shoot or socializing with friends. Sending a text to inquire about the photo shoot's conclusion, her mother received a response from Georgia, indicating that the photo shoot had ended some time ago and that she was spending time with friends, suggesting she might return home late. Unperturbed by the exchange, Georgia's mother interpreted the text as typical, noticing the customary trio of kissy face emojis that often punctuated her daughter's messages. Given Georgia's responsible nature, her mother harbored no suspicions of trouble. As the night progressed, Georgia's parents retired to bed, assuming she would return home by morning. However, upon awakening the next day, their unease mounted upon realizing Georgia's continued absence. Concerned, her mother reached out to her via text at 6:30 a.m., seeking an explanation for her prolonged absence. It wasn't until 7:30 a.m. that a response arrived, claiming Georgia had stayed over at a friend's house and her phone battery was dwindling. She reassured her mother that if she didn't respond further, it was due to her phone's impending shutdown. Unbeknownst to Georgia's mother, these messages were not authored by her daughter, setting off alarm bells as the situation grew increasingly ominous. On May 27th, Georgia's parents anticipated her return home after a music festival. However, when she failed to arrive, they assumed she had gone directly to the festival from her friend's house. Nevertheless, they expected her back by the following morning, as she had eagerly awaited her first driving lesson scheduled for that day. As the night wore on without Georgia's return, her parents grew increasingly anxious. Waiting up late into the night yielded no sign of her. With panic setting in, they reached out to relatives and friends, hoping for any information about her whereabouts. Yet, despite their efforts, no one had seen or heard from Georgia in days, deepening their concern and uncertainty. When Georgia failed to arrive home the following morning for her eagerly anticipated driving lesson, her family took immediate action, reporting her disappearance to the police. Desperate for answers, they provided authorities with all the information they could gather. However, their knowledge was limited to Georgia's attendance at a photo shoot at Jamie Reynolds' residence, with no further details about her whereabouts or companions after that point. In response, the police launched an investigation, focusing their attention on Jamie Reynolds. What they uncovered about him sent chills down their spines, revealing disturbing details that raised further concerns about Georgia's safety. Back in 2008, Jamie found himself in police crosshairs after an incident involving the attempted strangulation of a teenage girl. Despite the gravity of the situation, law enforcement opted for a cautionary approach, issuing Jamie a warning and allowing him to walk free without charges. However, when authorities stumbled upon this troubling episode in Jamie's past, their suspicions intensified. With Jamie emerging as the prime suspect in Georgia Williams' disappearance, police wasted no time in paying him a visit. Arriving at his residence, they encountered silence upon knocking on the door, compelling them to take more drastic action. Resorting to forced entry, they combed through the premises but found no trace of Jamie. Thus, a frenzied manhunt ensued as authorities intensified their efforts to track down the elusive suspect. After thorough inquiries at the petrol station, it became evident that none of their co-workers had encountered Jamie or Georgia. Their absence from their shifts raised significant alarms as they deviated from their usual routine. Although Jamie's parents were unreachable due to their vacation, they provided authorities with crucial information regarding the registration of Jamie's van. Armed with this vital lead, police across Shropshire promptly disseminated alerts to law enforcement agencies nationwide, urging them to be on high alert for Jamie's van. Before long, authorities tracked Jamie down in Glasgow, Scotland, a staggering 208 miles from his home. His sudden departure from the country sent shockwaves, serving as a glaring indicator of suspicious behaviour. On May 30th, Glasgow police apprehended Jamie Reynolds at a modest hotel, acting on suspicions of kidnapping. Taken into custody without delay, he faced immediate interrogation regarding Georgia's whereabouts. However, Jamie maintained ignorance of her location, offering no helpful insights to investigators. Subsequently, he was escorted back to Shropshire for further questioning. As Georgia's loved ones anxiously awaited updates, they received disheartening news regarding the investigation's progress. The grim outlook devastated the family, amplifying their anguish. With Jamie now detained as the primary suspect, law enforcement seized the opportunity to scour his residence for any pertinent evidence thoroughly. Amidst the search, authorities stumbled upon a camera containing an SD card. However, their hopes of uncovering vital clues were dashed upon discovering that all files had been systematically deleted, leaving investigators grappling with yet another frustrating setback. The camera underwent forensic examination at the police station, where experts diligently worked to retrieve the deleted files. Upon successful recovery, the retrieved data delivered a chilling denouement to the investigation. Among the recovered files were several images captured on the day of the photo shoot, offering a haunting glimpse into Georgia's final moments. The initial photographs depicted Georgia in seemingly ordinary poses at the outset of the photo shoot, confirming her presence at Jamie's residence that fateful day. Despite her outward appearance of contentment and compliance, it was evident that Georgia remained oblivious to the sinister intentions lurking beneath Jamie's facade. Tragically, she unwittingly walked into a perilous situation, unaware of the impending danger that ultimately befell her. As authorities sifted through the images, the tone grew increasingly grim and unsettling. Subsequent photographs revealed a harrowing sequence of events, portraying a distraught Georgia stripped of her clothes, standing vulnerable atop a red recycling bin, her hands seemingly bound behind her with a hanging rope ominously overhead. Tragically, the footage captured Jamie Reynolds' heinous acts as he callously filmed Georgia's final moments, depicting her futile struggle for breath. Shockingly, he proceeded to engage in despicable acts of necrophilia, violating her lifeless body in various rooms of the house, including his parents' bed. To compound the horror, Jamie documented his depravity with hundreds of additional photographs, showcasing Georgia in degrading positions. He callously stripped her of her jewelry, preserving them as grotesque trophies of his heinous crime. The police relentlessly scoured Jamie's residence, unearthing a staggering collection of 16,800 graphic photographs and 72 distressing videos. These explicit materials depicted unimaginable acts of violence, including sexual assault and snuff films showcasing torture and murder. Shockingly, it became apparent that Jamie himself was actively engaged in the creation of his snuff film, a chilling revelation. In a disturbing admission, he even confessed to deriving pleasure from acts of strangulation. Alarmed by their son's dark fascination, Jamie's parents abruptly cut short their vacation to meet with the authorities. During their conversation, they disclosed that Jamie had been exposed to this disturbing brand of ultra-violent pornography since he was just 14 years old. It is conceivable that his exposure to such content could have occurred even earlier, though their intervention came about when they discovered his activities. As they were unable to confiscate his laptop since he required it for school, they reached out to the internet provider and arranged for access to certain websites to be blocked. Nevertheless, at the age of 14, he independently contacted the internet provider and secured his own private Wi-Fi by making the payment, ensuring that his parents remained unaware of his continued access to these websites. When his parents initially discovered him viewing these videos, they grew alarmed and informed the police and child protective services. However, they were informed that no action could be taken as viewing such content was not deemed illegal. During the investigation, law enforcement discovered a collection of notepads containing 40 distinct narratives penned by Jamie. These stories revolved around the themes of inflicting harm, sexual assault, and the killing of women. Additionally, it was uncovered that Jamie had scoured social media platforms, printing and marking images of young girls with nooses around their necks. Among the narratives was one titled "Georgia Williams in Surprise," mirroring the tragic events that befell Georgia. Authorities suspect that this particular narrative may have been a premeditated plan, conceived from the outset to be actualized. Jamie initiated the writing process in January, completing it a mere 3 weeks before the murder occurred. Jamie stubbornly withheld any information regarding the whereabouts of Georgia's body, vehemently maintaining his innocence. Faced with his refusal to cooperate, investigators embarked on a painstaking journey to retrace Jamie's movements from the Monday morning following Georgia's murder. Their investigative trail commenced at the petrol station, where surveillance footage captured Jamie refueling his vehicle. Little did anyone know at the time that Georgia's lifeless body lay concealed in the back of his van. Following the fuel stop, Jamie embarked on a journey spanning 60 miles, eventually arriving at a movie theater. Remarkably, he callously abandoned Georgia's remains in the van, parked within the theater's lot, before proceeding inside to indulge in a film screening. In a disturbing turn of events, Jamie's actions at the movie theater represented his twisted attempt to fulfill his desire to take Georgia out on a date, albeit in a macabre and horrifying manner. However, law enforcement lost track of Jamie following his departure from the theater, prompting authorities to issue a public appeal for information regarding his whereabouts. Fortunately, this appeal yielded results, with individuals coming forward to report sightings of Jamie's van in the vicinity of the Nanty Garth mountain pass near Wrexham. This area, abundant with dense woodland and treacherously muddy terrain, served as the backdrop for Jamie's attempt to evade capture. Recollections of Jamie and his van were vivid among locals, particularly due to an incident where his vehicle became mired in mud. Good Samaritans had intervened to help extricate it from the muck. Acting on this crucial tip, law enforcement ventured into the wooded area where Jamie had been spotted. Tragically, it was in this secluded setting that they made the grim discovery of Georgia's unclothed body. Following the recovery, Georgia's remains were transported back to Shropshire. A subsequent post-mortem examination revealed that Georgia had succumbed to asphyxiation, likely resulting from pressure applied to her neck by a ligature. Additionally, forensic analysis uncovered bruising on her back, indicative of Jamie having forcefully pressed her downward using his knee, exacerbating her helplessness and suffering. Despite steadfastly maintaining his innocence and denying any involvement in her murder, Jamie's stance took a dramatic shift on the inaugural day of the trial in December 2013. Without warning, he opted to rise and plead guilty to all charges leveled against him. In a poignant moment, Georgia's father addressed the court, articulating the enduring anguish he and his wife bore from the haunting image of their daughter's lifeless body, lying in the solemn confines of the hospital's chapel of rest, an indelible scar etched upon their souls for eternity. Throughout the trial, revelations surfaced regarding Jamie's prior brushes with the law. In 2008, he had attracted police attention, receiving what the judge deemed a final warning, following an unsettling incident involving the confinement of another 17-year-old girl in his residence, a harrowing precursor to the tragedy that befell Georgia. In 2011, he found himself under scrutiny once more after an incident where he recklessly reversed his car into that of a girl who rebuffed his romantic advances. Despite this alarming behavior, the case was eventually closed. However, the judge, Mr. Justice Wilkie, did not mince words, labeling Jamie a sexual deviant and expressing grave concerns about his potential to escalate to become a dangerous serial offender. Consequently, Jamie was handed a whole life term, a sentence reserved for the most heinous of crimes, ensuring he would spend the rest of his days behind bars without the possibility of parole. This marked Jamie as the 46th individual to receive such a sentence, setting a grim record as the youngest in history to be condemned to a whole life term. Justice Wilkie's remarks during sentencing painted a chilling portrait of the events, underscoring the profound anguish inflicted upon Georgia. He emphasized the torturous nature of her ordeal, highlighting Jamie's twisted fixation with violent and sadistic pornography, culminating in a grotesque display of power over his victim as she faced a harrowing demise. Jamie Reynolds bowed his head in shame as Georgia's grief-stricken parents and sister listened to the harrowing details of her tragic demise and the horrors she endured at his hands. The courtroom was filled with unbearable tension as the jury was confronted with the gruesome images depicting Georgia's final moments, prompting her devastated family to flee in anguish. In 2014, Reynolds sought to appeal his whole life sentence but was met with defeat. The following year, a serious case review castigated police officers, children's services personnel, and mental health professionals for their handling of Reynolds before the murder. The review highlighted systemic failures in interagency collaboration when Reynolds had previously come to law enforcement's attention 5 years earlier, following an incident where he attempted to strangle another girl at his residence. Georgia's parents expressed profound sorrow upon reading the report, lamenting the missed opportunities to intervene and prevent their daughter's tragic fate, stating, "Having lost Georgia to pure evil, we cried when we read this report and the failings of all agencies involved because it was so obvious that Reynolds was, if not one already, a murderer in the making. Georgia's death could have been prevented." Outside the courtroom, Mr. Williams expressed the family's profound grief, stating, "There is no sentence that we can ever say we're satisfied with because it'll never bring Georgia back. She's dead, she's gone physically and lives in our hearts." He emphasized the irreparable loss they experienced and lamented that, regardless of the length of Reynolds' prison term, he still retained the one precious gift he had denied their daughter: life. "The one thing that will always get to us and cause us grief is the fact that even though Jamie Reynolds is serving a full life sentence, he still has life to hang on to," Mr. Williams remarked. Jamie Reynolds continues to serve his sentence in prison to this day. Georgia's mother, Lynette, has since penned their journey of grief in her book, Our Georgia, which delves into the family's profound sense of betrayal stemming from the failures that allowed Reynolds, with his disturbing fixation on snuff movies, to roam free and ultimately commit murder. Described as a powerful and moving memoir, the book serves as both a tribute to Georgia's memory and a poignant exploration of the aftermath of her tragic death. Georgia's tragic passing inflicted irreparable wounds upon those who cherished her, leaving behind an unfathomable void. Her absence stands as a poignant reminder of the fleeting nature of life and the importance of treasuring each precious moment with our loved ones. In the wake of her loss, the community united in solidarity, offering unwavering support to Georgia's grieving family and friends, providing a source of solace during their darkest days.